Lucius Faustus woke while Pompeii was still the color of unbaked dough, a pale gray gold that made roofs look like cooling loaves. He swung his legs from the cot inside his bakery, reached for the kneading basin, and whispered the same morning charm he had inherited from his father. May the flour rise like the sun and fall only into eager mouths. Then he set to work, forearms plunging into the yielding mass. The fragrance of yeast spread through the shop, escaping through the open shutters to tempt any passerby awake that early in the August heat. By the time the first customers appeared, Lucius had stacked amphora-shaped loaves in tidy pyramids, clouds of steam still drifting from their scored tops. He hardly noticed the tremor that rattled the oil lamps. It was the third tremor that week. Stone gods shook the dust from their shoulders and went still again. The mountain loomed to the north, quiet as a slumbering ox. Just as Lucius was sweeping stray flour across the tiled threshold, a woman's voice stopped him. "Tell me, baker, do you believe that bread is an argument against fate?" She stood framed by the doorway, travel-stained yet self-possessed, a slender Greek cloak draped over one shoulder. Her accent placed her somewhere between Athens and Miletus, but her gaze was Roman sharp, the color of dark honey. She looked at the bread as though it were a scroll she intended to annotate. Lucius blinked. "Bread feeds the belly, not the fates," he answered, more brusquely than he intended. "Ah, but consider," she persisted, stepping inside while the bell above the door chimed softly. "Grain is ground, water added, heat applied, wheat becomes dough, dough becomes bread. A sequence, yes, but with a window of choice. Too little heat, and you have porridge, too much, and you have charcoal. Between those extremes, the baker intervenes." She smiled. "So, perhaps you do wrestle with destiny after all." Lucius found himself grinning. "If I wrestle, I do it before dawn, with flour in my hair and no audience." He wiped his hands on his apron. "I am Lucius Faustus, and you are?" "Thea of Miletus," she said. "Philosopher, occasional tutor, and seeker of good bread." He tore off a heel of a still warm loaf and offered it. She bit into the crust, closed her eyes, and emitted a soft sound of pleasure that made Lucius's ears warm. "Well done," she said. "You have disproved 2 of my theses in one bite." "2? That all Romans burn their bread, and that pleasure must always be purchased at the cost of wisdom." He laughed. "Then I've done the empire a favor this morning." Thea glanced about at the simple shells, the clay amphorae of olives and dates. "Will you allow me to repay you with a small discourse? This afternoon I deliver a talk at the Forum Triangulare on the geometry of the soul. I promise it is shorter than its title. Join me, and afterward I will purchase every last loaf you have." Lucius considered. Afternoon was his only respite before the pre-dawn cycle began again, but the sincerity in her eyes drew him like the smell of cinnamon. "I'll come," he said. "You buy the loaves anyway, talk or no." She inclined her head. "A free exchange then. Until later, Lucius Faustus." The bell chimed again as she left. For the next hours, as citizens filed in to buy their daily bread and slaves ran errands for patrician kitchens, Lucius felt oddly buoyant. He reshaped dough with more care than ever, as though Thea's talk of fate and geometry had given every crust an invisible measure. Just before midday, he closed the shutters, slung a leather satchel over his tunic, and strode toward the forum. The sun hammered tiles and marble alike. Fountains hissed like frying oil. He turned a corner and nearly collided with a cart laden with amphorae of wine from Neapolis. The driver cursed, then laughed it off. "Blame the mountain, baker. It keeps grumbling under our feet. Lucius waved him on and hurried farther until he reached the broad steps of the Forum Triangulare. A small knot of listeners gathered beneath a canvas awning. Thea stood on a low platform, hair pinned back, gesturing with measured grace. He took a place at the edge, flushed with both heat and anticipation. And so, she was saying, if the soul is triangular, subject, object, and the space between, then the task of life is not to collapse the structure, but to widen it, to make room for compassion and curiosity. Her voice threaded through the crowd, like water finding every crack of thirst. Lucius listened, entranced. Her ideas were half music, half mathematics, yet she spoke plainly enough for even an illiterate sailor to nod along. When she concluded, applause rippled through the audience. She stepped down, spotted Lucius, and walked straight toward him. "How did I fare?" she asked. "You widen my soul by 3 fingers at least," he said, surprising himself. "Then the geometry holds." She looped her arm through his. "Come, I intend to make good on my promise to empty your shelves." They retraced his route. Street vendors hawked garum and figs. A pair of gladiators swaggered past, oiled muscles glinting. Somewhere above, the mountain released another low rumble, like an indolent lion. Dust drifted down, barely noticed. Back at the bakery, Thea ran her hand appreciatively over the still warm loaves. "A philosopher is rarely rich," she admitted, "but I travel with patron's coin for necessities." She paid him in silver that caught the afternoon light. Instead of wrapping the bread for travel, she stacked it on the counter in a fragrant wall. "For the road?" Lucius asked. "For the children who pass here each evening," she answered. "You will hand it out when they come from their lessons. A gift, but say it's from you." Unknown benefactors breed suspicion. Lucius was unable to speak for a moment. "You shame me," he managed. "No," she said softly. "I invite you." She looked about the cramped shop. "Your oven must scorch by late afternoon. Would you walk with me to the port where the breeze is kinder?" He extinguished his lamps, left a note for his apprentice, and joined her. They moved through streets thrown into copper radiance by the dipping sun. At the waterfront, sails bobbed like pale moths against indigo. They sat on a stone bollard, legs dangling above gentle waves. "Why Pompeii?" he asked. "Curiosity," she said. "Rome is a lion, Alexandria a hawk, but Pompeii is a mirror. It shows the empire its own appetite: wine, song, painted walls, and fresh bread at dawn." "And the mountain?" He gestured to the silhouette of Vesuvius darkening against the horizon. She gazed at it. "I study change, Lucius. Mountains look eternal, yet they breathe in centuries. Something in that mountain is stirring. I felt tremors in Miletus once. They spoke of distant quakes beneath the sea. I wonder what a mountain says when it stirs near men." Lucius shivered, though the air was warm. "May it keep its counsel another 1,000 years." Night drew them together. They spoke of childhoods, hers among scrolls and his among sacks of grain, of ambitions. She hoped to compile a compendium of moral paradoxes. He dreamed of a bakery in Rome, aroma pouring into every alley. When they finally walked back, their hands brushed, rested together, entwined. Lucius felt as though a hidden lever inside his chest had been thrown, aligning every gear with sudden precision. He left her at the modest inn off the Via dell'Abbondanza, promising breakfast at dawn. All the way home, he replayed her words. A sequence, yes, but with a window of choice. Under his feet, the cobbles occasionally trembled, but he was too full of her presence to fear. Before dawn, on the 24th, he rose and stoked the oven. Embers glowed like miniature suns. While dough rose, he thought of bringing Thea a honey-glazed loaf. her name scored into the crust. Then the first thunderclap shook the door on its hinges. He rushed outside. Above Vesuvius, an ebony column was soaring, spreading at the top into a monstrous pine of smoke. Lightning flickered inside it, purple and green threads in swirling ash. Shouts erupted in every direction, mothers calling children, dogs howling, vendors abandoning stalls. Thea. The word burned louder than the mountain's roar. Lucius sprinted through choking dust toward her inn. Each breath tasted of brimstone. The crowd flowed opposite, away from the forum, toward the gates. But he pushed through, heart-battering. He found her struggling with a leather travel case in the doorway. Her eyes widened in relief at seeing him. "Lucius!" "There's no time," he said, grabbing her hand. "We must reach the sea." She nodded, coughing. Together they ran, feet skidding on pumice, already layering the street like cruel snow. Statues toppled, roof tiles shattered. Overhead, the sky darkened beyond twilight, though the sun had barely risen. At his insistence, they detoured to the bakery. Augustus, his young apprentice, was there, frozen in fear. "Take this cloak," Lucius ordered, wrapping the boy. "Go with the others to the southern gate and keep running until the air is clear." "What about you?" Augustus cried. "Fate has set me another road," Lucius said. He pressed the keys of the bakery into the boy's palm, symbolic nonsense now, and pushed him into the river of fleeing bodies. Inside the shop, he stuffed a small sack with dried figs, water skins, and the honey loaf he had made for Thea. He hesitated a single heartbeat to touch the wooden peel, the baskets, the ovens that had defined his life. Then a deafening crack split the roof. Tiles sprayed across the countertop. He ran out just in time. They shoved through the chaos toward the harbor. Ash rained like hot sleet, stinging exposed skin. At every intersection, citizens wept, prayed, fought for space beneath makeshift shields. An ox collapsed in its harness, lungs clotted, yet some helped strangers to their feet. A fountain boy handed water to the elderly, tears carving white tracks down his ashen face. Near the temple of Apollo, Thea stumbled. Lucius caught her, saw blood on her sandal strap. She pushed hair from her eyes. "I'm slowing you." "I will carry you if I must," he said, voice hoarse. A sharp vibration shuddered through the ground, a larger tremor, as though the mountain had delivered a decisive stomp. Columns cracked, somewhere behind them, a roof caved with a booming sigh. They limped on. When at last the harbor came into view, hope faltered. The quays thronged with panicked citizens, ships overloaded or already casting off, oars churning dark water flecked with floating pumice. Screams echoed as some dove in desperation. Lucius scanned the chaos. At the far end, a small cargo vessel still secured, its crew debating whether to flee. He squeezed Thea's hand. "Move! Now!" They elbowed past a cluster of slaves, kneeling in prayer, dashed across a listing plank, and reached the ship. A bearded captain glared. "We're full!" Lucius thrust a purse of silver into the man's chest, Thea's payment for the bread he had never distributed. "Room for 2 more." He looked back to shore. 3, he corrected, spotting an old woman crumpled beside coiled rope, coughing violently. He hauled her to her feet. The captain swore, but pocketed the coin. The sailor nearest the mooring hacked through the line. Instantly, the vessel began drifting. Rowers bent to their oars, black ash speckling their backs like burns. Lucius guided Thea and the old woman to a sheltered spot against cargo crates. The sea roiled, coated by falling debris. Behind, the mountain's column thinned, then collapsed upon itself, a black avalanche surging down the slope toward the city with impossible speed. Gasps rose from the boat as the pyroclastic surge engulfed villas, temples, and finally the basilica, consuming Pompeii in a single rolling night. Lucius held Thea as wind blasted the ship, hot enough to singe robes, even at distance. Minutes dragged like hours. At last, the violence quieted to a distant rumble. Only then did he realize his arms were locked around her, fingers trembling. The old woman whispered, "The gods have ended an age." Thea looked at Lucius, eyes shining with tears, reflecting ember-colored dawn spreading behind Survivor's darkness. "And we still breathe, bred against fate," he murmured. She managed a sad smile. Choice within sequence. The captain barked orders, steering toward Stabby Eye's coast, where the air looked clearer. All day they rode through drifting ash. Survivors coughed, wept, stared back at the vanishing shoreline that had been their lives. When the sun set red behind smoky clouds, they anchored in a small inlet. Crew and passengers slumped in exhaustion. Lucius tore the honey loaf, now flattened but intact, and offered a piece to Thea. She tasted, closed her eyes, and let tears fall freely. "Sweetness," she whispered, "is the tongue's prayer for tomorrow." They shared the loaf among everyone, even the gruff captain, until only crumbs remained. Stars emerged, faint behind haze. Later, sitting together on the deck, Thea spoke. "Pompeii is gone, Lucius. The mirror shattered. Nothing we built there stands." He stared at his calloused palms. "Then we build elsewhere." "Where?" she asked softly. "You spoke of widening the soul. Rome is wide. Ostia, Puteoli, anywhere people wake hungry." He took her hand. "I will bake. You will teach. Bread and questions. You said they keep destiny honest." Her fingers tightened around his. "If we dare to try, let us found a place where every child learns geometry with crust crumbs on the table." They sat in silence, the gentle slap of water against hallmarking time in careful beats like a metronome. Lucius realized that even the mountain, with all its fury, had not buried the secret lever Thea had triggered inside him. The gears still turned, drawing him forward. Morning brought a pale sun bleeding through drifting particulate. The captain decided to sail north along the coast, skirting peril until they reached Ostia's busy harbor. Thea helped bandage the wounded. Lucius distributed figs, reciting the same charm, "May the fruit rise like the sun," and some smiled weakly, as if the words themselves fed them. Days later, they disembarked amid Ostia's masts and shouted bargains. Ash still clung to their sandals, a pilgrim's dust. They could have gone separate ways, Thea to libraries, Lucius to ovens, but instead they found a modest storefront near the grain warehouses. The landlord, seeing the line of refugees seeking purpose, leased it cheap. While Lucius cleaned soot from the stone hearth, Thea painted words in Greek and Latin on a plank above the door: "Panis et sapientia," bread and wisdom. Children stopped to watch. Sailors sniffed the prospect of future loaves. By evening, the shop was half ready. That night, they lay on the roof beneath unfamiliar stars. Smoke from Vesuvius made the horizon glow faintly like a banked forge hundreds of miles away. The loss ached, but something raw and bright had been fired in them. Lucius turned to Thea. "Tomorrow, I'll fetch flour, and I shall compose a lesson on impermanence," she replied. "First axiom, the ground can open beneath us without notice. Second axiom, hearts may open the same way." He leaned in, tasting on her lips the mingled memory of ash and honey. For a moment, he imagined the fates scratching their heads above the celestial loom, threads tangled by an unanticipated knot of desire and survival. Bred against fate indeed, he thought. A soft breeze carried the sea's salt over the rooftops, cleansing yet bracing, much like the future itself. Below, the oven bricks cooled in readiness, and in the quiet between two breaths, he heard a sound that lifted him, the faintest crackle, not of eruption, but of dormant embers awakening. eager to turn dough into sustenance, the sound of work, of life renewed. He smiled into Thea's hair. "We will rise," he whispered. "The way bread does," she answered, voice steady, with warmth and patience. The stars tilted overhead, silent witnesses, as the city settled into sleep, and the two who had outrun the ash kept vigil for dawn. Baker and philosopher, partners now in a craft stitched from grain and wonder, forging a tomorrow wrested, loaf by loaf, from the unpredictable hands of fate.